It was a Super Tuesday showdown in states across the country with multiple delegates up for grabs. Bernie, Biden, and Bloomberg and Warren all hoping to make a move. Joining us in studio now is political expert Dennis Darnoy. What a wild day.
It's absolutely crazy, and even topped off today with Bloomberg dropping out.
I mean, that is just huge news because, I mean, we didn't expect him to be gone before Michigan.
No, we didn't. I mean, last time we had a conversation, we thought 3 people would drop out, and it would just be Bloomberg, Warren fighting with Sanders and Biden, and yet here he is. He's out, and Elizabeth Warren has an existential crisis on her hands.
Yeah, it wasn't long ago that we were saying Joe Biden doesn't look like he's going to make it. He wasn't doing great in the debates, right, and he wasn't doing well in these early states, but all of a sudden South Carolina just propelled him, and of course, you know, with Amy Klobuchar dropping out and Pete Buttigieg dropping out, and both giving their support to Biden, voters said, whoa.
It was a quick rally, and to be honest, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in political history. For someone to catapult from South Carolina, sweep in states that no one thought he'd win. I mean, nobody predicted he would win in Massachusetts. The fact that he's leading in Maine, the fact that he won in Oklahoma, and that there is this coalescing around the Biden candidacy. Last time we said, you know, hey, look, the Democrats are doing what Republicans did in 2016. Well, they just reversed course because Republicans never got behind one single candidate, and now we're seeing Democrats do that.
So what was going through the minds of voters? First of all, you had a lot of people who voted early. Their votes didn't count.
Right.
But then the people who went to the polls, suddenly they had to basically change candidates within 24 hours.
2 things happened. One, they saw how poorly Sanders did in South Carolina. Second of all, when he went on 60 Minutes and made that confession about Cuba, that concerned a lot of voters. And people, at the end of the day, Democrats are united behind the fact that they want to see Donald Trump gone. And so Biden is now the beneficiary of that, with voters thinking he is the guy that can replace Donald Trump.
What do you think made him want to go on 60 Minutes? You know, it's again, one of those things, you know you're going to get tough questions, and the answers that he gave did not make a lot of Democrats happy.
I think sometimes front runners believe their own polls, and I think he felt he was in a position that if he could put Biden away, that he would become the definitive front runner, and of course that backfired on him.
And so, I mean, there were so many surprises yesterday, but like Texas, you know, Biden surges to win Texas. Really interesting. That's a huge state, a lot of delegates.
Yeah, and what you saw was late-breaking voters overwhelmingly go to Biden, and I think they tipped their hand when they held that rally there, and Amy came down, and Mayor Pete came down, and Beto O'Rourke was there. That was an indication that they saw something in the numbers where they could make a surprise. Now, the Biden camp admitted they didn't think they were going to win, but what they did is they targeted specific precincts that were delegate-rich, hoping to close that gap, and it paid off in you know, numbers for them.
So do you think the party got behind Biden and went to Klobuchar, went to Buttigieg and said, look, you guys have to drop out before Super Tuesday. He's got to get delegates in Super Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't happen organically. I mean, there is a movement afoot to rally behind Joe Biden. He is now clearly the establishment candidate, with Bloomberg dropping out before the Michigan vote, given how much he spent here. Again, it's clear that a message is being delivered. Joe Biden is the establishment candidate. We need to get behind him, and we can't go into a convention with him far behind Bernie and delegates.
Do Klobuchar and Buttigieg do this in hopes of maybe getting the vice presidency nod, or are they just told, look, you don't have, we've done the polling, you don't have the numbers, you need, for the sake of the party, to drop out now?
Politicians aren't known for their altruistic behavior, so there is certainly something that has been offered or has been suggested to them for their support of the candidacy. I highly doubt it would be a vice presidency. I think that there are measures that they want to hit for that, and Amy and Pete don't necessarily hit that mark. I think Joe can do well in the Midwest on his own, but they will certainly be offered something if they haven't. And again, sometimes it's as simple as paying down down campaign debt, fundraising on your behalf. But yeah, I'm sure that they got behind Joe because of something that they were offered.
And what about Bloomberg? He could have stayed in. He had the money to stay in. It was clear that he would not get enough delegates. Do you think he just said, I guess I'm not going to win, I'm going to jump, or do you think there's more to it with him?
Well, two things. One, he's a businessman, and his return on investment is incredibly poor. If this were any type of stock, he would be bailing at this point in time. Second of all, I think he can look at the numbers and see how he actually hurt Biden in California, where he was taking votes away from Biden, which then takes away from the delegates. So those two things combined, he thought this was the right time to get out.
So Michigan votes on Tuesday. Do you think Elizabeth Warren is still in it come Tuesday?
That's a great question. I would not have said that Bloomberg was out today. I think she has to make a determination because now she is doing to Sanders what Bloomberg was doing to Biden. So is she still in? I'm going to say that yes, she stays in for Michigan, but she may be out quickly after that.
Or if the party wants Biden to win, do they try and encourage her to stay in as long as possible to take votes away from Bernie Sanders?
That's a possibility as well. And she's got to make that calculation. Does she move and help Biden, or does she leave and help Sanders? And that's a great question that she's got to answer. And
with all the states and delegates in front of us, what has to happen for Biden and what has to happen for Bernie?
So the next 2 weeks are critical. You've got Michigan next Tuesday, bellwether state for the national election. And with all due respect to California and Texas, Michigan is more important in terms of picking the next president. So whoever comes out of this state with a win is going to be huge. Then you go into Florida on the 17th and Arizona. So those are two swing states. If Biden can sweep all three states, I think you're looking at the next Democratic nominee. But if Bernie can make the case that he can win in a swing state for the general election, then he's got staying power, and we're looking to go to a contested convention.
And if Warren drops out, do her supporters likely go to Sanders?
I mean, given that it's now Sanders and Biden, yeah, you're probably going to see the majority of her supporters who are ideologically aligned with Bernie and the progressive movement move there. But there will be some that go to Biden.
And how do you think Donald Trump likes this new look with Biden and Bernie?
He's legitimately concerned about Biden because he knows that he plays in those states that Trump absolutely needs to win, and he can be competitive in Arizona and Florida. So he's hoping that his message that Bernie is getting, screwed again as he did in 2016 takes some hold, and the progressives really fight for Bernie.
He'd rather run against Sanders.
Be a much easier win because the electoral college map would be easier for Trump to hold against Sanders than it would for Biden.
All right, thanks for joining us.
You.
We'll be right back with more news now after this. President Donald Trump has created a new presidential commission on law enforcement, the first time this has been done in 50 years. Named to the commission, Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard, who joins us now. That's a pretty big honor.
It's, I think, a representation of the good work of the Sheriff's Office. We've got a great team, and they do good things, and I get recognized. So thank you to them for all the good stuff they do. But, in seriousness, it's an important issue. And as you said, it goes back to Lyndon Johnson. That was the last time we had a commission on criminal justice.
I mean, it really seems necessary. We've talked to a lot of law enforcement people on this show, and there seems to be an issue between the relationship between community and law enforcement. And it seems unnecessary because we know that 98% or more of law enforcement are out there putting their lives on the line for people, and yet there's a lot of blowback and a lot of ill will towards law enforcement from a small group of people, but
Right.
it has a big impact, and
Absolutely.
I think it has an impact on recruiting and finding people to go into the field. And I talked to police officers. Their dads were cops and their grandpa was a cop, but they don't know if they want their kid to be a cop, and that seems crazy.
You are spot on. Actually, the subcommittee I serve on is focused a lot on that. It's called Respect for Police. How do we get to the place we are today? Kind of like the Vietnam vets of the 70s, that they were asked to do a tough job, but they really were demonized and spit on when they got back from their deployment. And I mean, just young people that were giving their heart and soul for the country. And it's kind of a similar thing. We've got young men and women that are going into law enforcement for all the right reasons and are willing to risk their life for strangers. And the rhetoric has been such that it makes it out to be a group of people that don't care about other people or want to shoot somebody or all sorts of stuff. And as you said, it's more like 99.5% are doing the right thing every day. And the small number that is doing the wrong thing needs to be held accountable, without question. But it's never put into context. So on an annual basis, well over 1 million arrests happen every year, but you see some of the footage of the really bad outliers where improper force is used, and you see it over and over and over, and then maybe 2 weeks later another one. Let's say in a whole year it's 30. Well, out of the million, plus encounters, that's a small number. Again, it doesn't minimize what happened or shouldn't be held accountable, but there needs to be context that the vast majority every day are doing the right thing and doing it well. And how do we uplift and support them while we hold those others accountable?
So do you think it's just the evolution of cameras being everywhere, being on phones, wearing body cams, which most people support, most law enforcement support wearing body cams, but it's just everywhere. And then, of course, social media is everywhere, and that's relatively new. You used to wait and see something on the news. Now you just can watch stuff on your phone in almost real time.
Right.
Or clips of something that has no context whatsoever.
And that's exactly the point. Like, we had a case where somebody had put a clip up and it got like 1 million views, but it didn't tell the context. It didn't say that someone had called 911 and the whole totality of it, and so the public didn't know any. They just thought, somebody got approached because they had their hands in their pocket. Well, no, the pizza store called 911, said, we've been robbed, armed robbery, like 9 times. This guy's walked past our front window like numerous times looking in with his hand in his pocket. We think we're about to get held up. Well, that's a different story than, I was stopped because I had my hands in my pocket.
Right.
And so those little bit of snippets turn into false kind of premise, and then they get shared, and all of a sudden you're trying to beat back a completely false story. So I think social media is part of it. I think the 24-hour news cycle. So, we never used to see if somebody used improper force in Tucson, Arizona, we wouldn't see it 7 times in Detroit, Michigan. We do now.
Right.
Because if it's egregious, it catches people's eye, so they play it, and over and over and over. It's egregious, without question. Ought to be held accountable, without question. But that begins to drive, again, the repetitive view. Wow, there's another cop. Oh, there's another cop. But you never see the pool in which that comes in totality. And that, again, goes to context.
Do you think there's a potential issue with the blue curtain? They in the few cases that come forward, sometimes administrations are tough to come out and say, you know what, this guy's a bad apple, we're going to deal with it, or we did it wrong this time and we're going to change the way we do it, which the public is pretty understanding that it's a difficult, tough job.
Sure.
But sometimes I think there's a problem with people saying, no, we're good, instead of having a full airing out of the issues.
And I think that's true with every profession, that, it used to be, let's just keep this on the down low. We still see that problem in a lot of schools, as it relates to sexual assaults and issues. But that culture, I think, has been changed over time. And certainly most of the law enforcement executives that I know and work with, they're like, if we have a cancer, we have to deal with it before it spreads. We want to show accountability to the public, but we also want to make sure that we send a message, this is unacceptable, before people look at it and say, well, if they get away with that, and then it begins to metastasize.
So how can you change that perception of it's just a small percentage and it's being dealt with?
Well, part of it is people like you that talk about it, and we can put it statistically into context that, this is a small number. Again, don't minimize the fact that it's egregious when it happens, but it's small statistically. And let's hold up all those men and women that are doing the right thing every day, rather than just focus on the ones that are doing the wrong thing every day.
All right, let's take a short break, and we'll be back with more with the sheriff right after this. Our conversation with Sheriff Michael Bouchard continues. So this commission is going to look at a lot of different things. What are some of the other more important issues that you're going to be looking at on this commission?
Well, I'm on the subcommittee on respect for police. So part of what we're looking at is how we share that context, how we improve how we do things, how we improve the morale of law enforcement that are doing a really tough job and go home with the kind of burden. You know, some of it deals with that's other subcommittees is the health of police. We've seen suicides, that are a huge problem in a lot of professions, but specifically in law enforcement. More police officers died at their own hand last year than died in the line of duty. That's something we have to focus on and do better, making sure that they have the support in those dark moments and a relief valve to help them through that. And it's because of all the terrible things that they see, and then you pile on, they go to get a cup of coffee and somebody spits in it or writes something on it, or, it's just a constant berating, and then you couple that with, the shift work and the terrible hours and the absence from your family, and all of a sudden they can get into a dark spot, and we have to help them through that. So that's one of the subcommittees, relationship building in the communities, justice, equal justice in the community. There's a host of subcommittees that are going to focus on the totality of the criminal justice system to try to look at what we need to do systemically. Police are just one part of it. Obviously, you've got courts, you've got treatment, you've got diversion, you've got all these other components that are spinning around this, and how do we engage those together in a new way to make it better for everybody?
The job has changed a lot since you first got in it for a lot of reasons. One that jumps to my mind is the number of mental health issues that you guys have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And the other is technology, which it's been very helpful, I imagine. What are some of the ways things have changed, and where do you see it going forward?
Yeah, you're spot on. Mental health is a huge challenge for law enforcement because, in my opinion, society, specifically states and federal government, have kind of walked away from mental health services. And tragically, the men and women that need mental health services on a full continuum have a much smaller ability to access it in terms of beds, in terms of treatment centers, in terms of a full continuum of opportunity. And so as a result, they end up in the spots that are not best suited for mental health treatment, jails and prison. So when I became the sheriff, about 8% of our population was on psychotropic meds, meaning they had such serious mental health challenges they were medicated. Now typically we're north of 32% on a daily basis in my jail. That means almost a third of the population has serious mental health issues, and we're not the best location for that to be treated for the individual's mental health or societally for what makes sense. And yet that's what's happening.
Let me switch gears a little bit. You recently visited the Holocaust Memorial Center, which I think is fantastic for your office to get out there. But one of the things that was discussed was hate crimes, and we've seen a lot of that in lots of religions. But can you tell us a little bit about why that was so important?
Yeah, I have taken our senior command before to the Holocaust Museum, and actually this is probably about I've been there well over 10 times, either locally or in Washington, D.C., or even in Israel. And I think each time you come away with something different, something new that is impactful on you. And my principal message to our senior command, I brought people lieutenant and above because we had a bunch of people retire and we have some new promotions, so I wanted to bring those folks that had never been there yet. The thing that really struck me in the Washington Holocaust Museum was how many pictures there were of the police officers in Germany, not just standing by, but participating in the roundup of the Jewish people. And how you go from being a protector and being the person that stands in front of evil to being part of it is scary, and it chills me to the bone. And I think we have to constantly remind ourselves things can repeat themselves if we're not on guard. And so a reminder to my command staff, we're that protector. We stand between hate, whether it's focused on a religion or a race or gender or identity or preference or whatever reason you hate somebody, we're going to stand between that hate and the person you hate, because hate sometimes gets motivated to action. We can't change everybody's heart, but we can try to be the line between them and their object of their hate if they try to motivate to action. And in Germany, it was motivated action on an incredibly organized and large scale, and we see the scary outcome.
You have a lot of places of worship in Oakland County. I know, where I go to church, there's police officers that are there, and I'm glad to see them there. But do you have people come to you and ask for a plan? How should we do this? How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, my emergency preparedness and Homeland Security division at the Sheriff's Office gets regular requests, and we regularly provide training for houses of worship, for schools, businesses on things they need to think about for active shooters or for different threats. We've taught them in temples and synagogues, in mosques, in churches, in schools, down the street at Channel 2, you name it, we've taught them there to try to give some ideas on how they should maybe prepare, what they need to think about. And, it's one of those things that I remind people. It's kind of like buying fire insurance for your house. Chances are your house will never burn down. But you research it, you think about it, you analyze it, you buy an insurance policy, and then you put it in the file drawer, and it's ready in case you ever need it. But you don't, get paranoid about it or huddle up in a corner and don't function because of it. Same thing about active shooters or terrorists or tornadoes. Think about what you would do, how you would do it, when you would do it, and now go on with your life. Because chances are it's not going to happen to you, but if it does, now you're prepared.
Because help is coming, but it's so crucial in those first few seconds of what is done,
Right.
so that when you do get there, you can bring a resolution.
Every second you can delay a perpetrator from getting to the victim or more victims, it increases the likelihood they'll be interrupted by law enforcement because they're coming fast.
All right, thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
Hope to talk to you soon. That's our show for tonight. For everyone here at News Now, I'm Kevin Dietz. Good night.